He knows the content. He's here all the time.
Oh, okay.
All right. Hi, all. I am Dr. Carr here at Kentucky State, or just Sarah is fine. I don't care as much for formalities. We are actually going to talk about managing reproduction in sheep, well, small ruminants in general. But I have a lovely undergraduate student that works for me, and he has been working on this BVD grant, which a lot of you have heard the content before, or at least some of y'all hear all the time. So they might be upset about this because I didn't really tell people, but I'm going to give him 8 minutes of my time so he can practice his formal presentation skills. Try to get this to you because he is going to be going around the state talking to some producers, and we are a teaching university, so I think this is appropriate for him and his training as a young professional. What mic do you want?
I guess so. I gotta press a button. All right. Howdy, y'all. I'm Jacob Wills. I'm presenting on BVD and persistently infected cattle today. She gave me a great intro, so I don't have to give you my own disclaimer, but bear with me. So BVD, it's a poorly named virus, bovine viral diarrhea virus. Now, when you hear that, you assume that everything that it's about is going to be diarrhea, but it actually has a whole host of other symptoms. But the main thing to get from it right here is it's highly contagious. It causes millions of dollars of losses. And another important note is it can appear in not just cattle, but also deer as well. So like I said, diarrhea is not the only symptom. It can lead to bovine respiratory disease, BRD. I'm sure y'all are very familiar with that and all the losses that it incurs. But you can also have abortion, stillbirths, infertility, immune suppression, and birth defects. So it is a virus. You have to get it from other animals. Your cattle aren't just going to spontaneously contract it from their environment. They're going to get it from new cattle you bring onto your operation, or calves are going to get it from the cow during pregnancy. But you can also get it from semen of bulls. So if a bull had a transient infection, just your run-of-the-mill normal, you think they get sick, they get better, bulls can actually carry it in their semen for, it's been proven, years afterwards. So you want to make sure that your bulls are properly vetted. So like I was talking about, you have your transient infection, which is what you think of when you get sick. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. From my understanding, that most of your bulls that are going to be used regularly for breeding and stuff like that, they do test them. Okay, but will it show up if they happen? Will it show up? If they had it before and they do carry it for a longer period afterwards, when they're tested for BVD, it will show up. But they have to be tested? Yes, sir. Yeah, the bull will outwardly appear normal, but it'll still carry the virus internally.
If you're looking in the semen too, you would have to request a specialty test like a PCR or something from a lab. But in the semen is not even close to the most common way. And so the trade-off might be somewhat, it may not be necessary for certain production systems, but if you were gonna continually collect from him and use it for AI, then maybe I'd care a little bit more, but I don't think it's as critical in terms of BVD as, you know, checking stockyard animals or something like that.
Thank you very much. I hope we got your question answered effectively. The other type of infection is going to be your persistent infection. These are the animals that are sick and contagious with the virus for their entire lives. They're not going to get better. It is part of them. They are typically, if you have a persistently infected calf born, it's going to be one of your problem calves. It's not going to put on weight great. It's going to be getting sick, That's because the virus has compromised its immune system. But also, there are calves that are born that are persistently infected that appear outwardly completely healthy. So the most common ways to get a PI calf is if the mother is a persistently infected animal, she'll give birth to PI calves. But the most common way is if the mother gets infected with the virus, a regular transient infection, during gestation. So if she gets infected during the first month of pregnancy, she's not going to keep that calf. She's going to lose it. But the period of 2 to 4 months is when you'll get your persistently infected calves. The reason why that happens is because the immune system on the calf is forming at that period. So when it's being formed in utero, the immune system is formed with the virus in it to where it thinks it's just a part of the calf and it's not going to mount an immune response. But if the mother gets infected anywhere between month 5 to 9, she'll probably have an abortion, or it's possible that she'll have a normal calf too. So the best ways to go about testing, you have chute side tests, which you can buy and you can do testing on your own operation, or you can mail ear notches out to the University of Kentucky or take them to your local veterinarian.
Okay, now you doing that blood testing, right? Okay, you said you do it yourself.
Yes, sir.
Okay, they have a testing kit that you
Yes, you can order snap tests. And the ones that I've done use ear notches, but there's also blood tests as well.
It's like a COVID test, just like a COVID test, and you can do it inside, and it can tell. I think he talks more about it.
So for the ear notch testing, you have an ear notcher. Has anyone used one of these before? Okay, well, it's really simple. You just hold it up to the edge of the ear, and quickly and with enough force, you take a little notch out of the ear. You're gonna place it in a Ziploc bag, and you're gonna label it with the calf's information. And then from there, you can decide to send it to UK, take it to your veterinarian, or you could drive it to the lab yourself. These chute side tests can be kind of expensive. It's gonna be cheaper to have it done by somebody else. But if you wanted to do everything in-house and maintain that independence, it's a good option. Do you need me to go back? Okay. So who are you testing? Well, if you test your calves and your calves turn up negative, you know the mother's going to be negative. New animals that you bring onto your operation, you want to get them tested as well as quarantine them. And if you have calves or cows that abort, it's generally a good idea to test them as well, because they may have aborted due to the virus. Now, if you have a positively infected animal, you're going to want to retest to just make sure. Now, if it's a persistently infected animal, it's always going to come up positive. It's not going to get better. There's a few options you have with that. You can sell it to somebody that feeds out PI calves, but either way, you're going to end up having to euthanize the animal. The reason you want to do that is, although outwardly it may appear completely healthy, and it seems like you're taking a big loss, but that animal is continually infecting all the other animals on your operation. So it's, in the end of the day, you're losing a lot more money. So prevention, like I said, testing new animals that come to your operation. Vaccinating is always a good approach. You're going to want to limit your travel in between different farms as well. And just be aware of where you might bring contagions from. So these are our note cards. We are going to have them. One thing that I do want to point out, though, is killed vaccines versus modified live. Your modified live vaccines are going to be more effective, but you're going to want to use killed vaccines on pregnant cows, because if you use modified live on pregnant cows, there's a chance that they'll lose the calf, they'll abort. That's all I have for you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all for your time for Jacob. Just a couple of things. As you know, I'm pretty eccentric, and if you've listened to me talk before, I'm awful with a microphone. So I will do my best, but occasionally it will come in and out just because I move around a lot, and I'm not trying to do that, but if you don't hear something, if you need something repeated, feel free to just speak out. I am going to talk about managing reproduction in small ruminants. I love my small ruminants, and I specialize in reproductive physiology, which is, I think we're all weird that do that, but here we are. This is going to be basically an overview. So who all in here is a small ruminant producer? Yes. So I know meat goats. What do you have? Goats. Yeah, goats. I talked to you guys a few weeks ago, right? What do you raise? Dairy goats, perfect. Okay, no sheep in here? Sheep, well, yeah, you, okay, meat sheep. I'm gonna talk about this. Most of what I say is gonna be consistent between the sheep and goats. If there's a difference, I will tell you there's a difference, but please note that I'm going to, if I'm saying ewe, in a general sense, I may be referring to both ewes and does. If I'm saying buck or ram, it may come out as one, but unless I'm specifying that this is a difference, then it's generally going to be referring to the sire. All right, so why do we care about reproduction? You can't have production without reproduction. We know that for perpetuation of species overall, we have to continue to reproduce. All species have to reproduce to make it. However, as I'll talk about a little bit, reproduction is a luxury, as Dr. Lay likes to say. So we cannot produce without reproduction, but we have to consider a lot of management decisions in this case. If we want to classify reproduction in small ruminants, they are what we call short day breeders. What that means is as we go throughout the year, as the days are getting shorter, so that's in the fall. After we have that peak in the summertime, the days are gonna start getting shorter. It gets kind of sad like it is right now and gets dark, 5 o'clock. During that time, that's when our sheep and goats are cycling naturally. It is based off their perception of light. And this is actually opposite of horses. So if you have done anything with horses, they are long day breeders. So they actually come in natural cyclicity in the spring. All right, no pointer? Okay. So if we look at this chart up here, I'm just mapping out the different months of the year. It starts in June and then is another year back in June. And so early on, we have this transitional period. It's right before the animals are gonna be naturally cyclic as those days start to be decreasing. When we come into, say, September through December, that's when our animals are naturally cyclic. And so that's typically when we'll see people introduce their ram or their buck and then let them breed, and they can do that without any intervention. After that, when we hit closer to January on, they are what we call anovulatory, which means they are no longer gonna cycle naturally. And if we wanna breed them during that time, then we are gonna have to do some external intervention. What does it mean to be cyclic? Well, this is referring to this continual cycle of an estrous cycle. So in women, we have a menstrual cycle. Everyone in here is aware of that. When we're speaking about it with our ruminants, small ruminants, other animals, we call this an estrous cycle. It happens every 17 days in sheep, and then about every 21 days in goats. So there's a little bit of species difference there. At the time of estrus is when ovulation occurs. We can see on the chart down here. Ovulation occurs, and then we have 24 to 36 hours, more or less, to get that animal bred before they are no longer receptive. After they are not receptive, then they go through a period where we have a hormone called progesterone, and it's quite high, and so it's a period of not being receptive to the male until it comes back into heat, where then it's going to get ready, ovulate again, and be able to be receptive once again. All right, and like I said before, fertility is a luxury. Reproduction is a luxury. If we do not manage all aspects of our reproduction before we get to breeding, then our animals are not going to be able to successfully reproduce. If we do not manage nutrition, as I'll talk about in a bit, we do not manage their health, their vaccine records, their vaccinations, don't have a plan, if they have poor genetics, then we're not going to be able to successfully breed and have a sustainable production system. All right, so before breeding, what do we want to consider? Like I said, we have questions we can ask. When do you want those lambs and those kids on the ground? What does that look like? What about nutrition? What forages do you have available? What's your market? Are you financially able to intervene more than simply throwing the ram or buck out in the field? Do you have the labor, and are you controlling that cycle? These are just some of our questions, and we really need to plan, because reproduction success is in planning and management year-round, not just in the fall. First, we got to consider our goal. Typically in small ruminants, we shoot for 200% lambing or kidding. We have 2 teats, well, I guess we do. Ewes and does have 2 teats. 2 kids are very efficient. Many can raise triplets or even potentially quads without needing intervention, but as you get those multiples, triplets and quads, you end up having more bottle babies, which is more labor intensive. We don't want a lot of bottle babies. They may not do so well. So if we're shooting for 200%, that's a pretty good balance in terms of how many animals versus what is profitable and what is realistic. If we want to think about fertility, we also have to think about what is the value of one more. If we think about more kids, more lambs, clearly more means more meat. However, it gets to a point where the value of one more may be less than the cost of getting that one more. And so considering your goals will help you decide if it makes more sense to get more or not. And that's particularly something you would think about once you've hit that 200% goal. We also don't want to overinvest. So I'm going to talk about some different reproductive management techniques. Some of them can be expensive. So on your farm and your production system, you have to think about your goals and consider if the investment in those extra tools are worth the cost it takes to purchase those, if it's worth it on the profit side. All right, so building a timeline, I'm going to talk about some different considerations when we go about making a plan. My timeline here starts at June. It goes through a full year and then back to January again. And I did this just to show a couple different concepts. When we look at this, we have considerations we need to make. So the first one is weather. We know that it's hot in the summer, cold in January and February. We may have some snow, ice, ground's hard. Gets very wet and gross, but also we'll start seeing those forages come up. It gets hot again, cold again, as this year cycles. This is gonna affect when you're gonna have those lambs or kids on the ground and what your goals are. It also affects, or you also have to consider housing. If you are trying to lamb out in the field or kid out in the field and the ground is frozen, you have to be considerate of the fact that many of those may freeze and you're gonna lose some of the kids and the lambs. As we come into the wet season, there are challenges, and so you also need to consider what that looks like. If you're bringing them indoors and you're using kidding jugs, you also have to consider the parasites that come along with that and whether they're outside or inside. And then in the summer, if you were to drop some animals on the ground in the summer, those lambs and kids don't necessarily do well. They just don't thrive, they don't grow like we see some of the other kids grow. And so that really affects the market, and you have to look at the other considerations if you're trying to lamb or kid that late in the season. Other things, the market. The market fluctuates considerably. As we said, that these are short day breeders, so naturally they're going to breed in the fall. If the majority of people are breeding in the fall, then The majority of people are selling, you know, right here, early summer, midsummer, early fall, depending on when they kidded or lambed. So the highest market is that off season. And to hit the highest market, you would have to do out of season breeding. I'm not talking about this today, but I just want you to know that this is something that exists in the industry, and this is why. Now that highest market in that season tends to correspond with some major holidays. And we're also hitting an ethnic market. So some of the holidays considered for our Christians or people from the United States may be, you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, some of those holidays around that time. But for some of our immigrant families, we have Diwali that starts to come into play. We can come all the way into Ramadan on the backside. And so some of these celebrations can really drive the market. When we think about the market as well, we have to think about the demographic or the demand of those that we are selling to. And so some of these communities actually like to have smaller lambs or smaller goats. So that also affects when you want to have your animals on the ground after breeding season. You want to consider labor. If you don't have enough hands to kid out all at once, or if you don't have the time to stay up every night for 3 months, then that would affect how you want to breed on the front side. And then do you have room for investment? So you consider that monetary aspect. This is an example. So if you breed on September 15th, very early in that breeding season, right at the front cusp, you would end up kidding or lambing out about February 8th. It's pretty early, right? It's still very cold, so then the considerations really are weather. But they're gonna grow earlier, and you'll hit a market earlier during the summer. If we were to switch to closer to the end of the breeding season, so December 1st, they're gonna lamb or kid circa April 27th. Then we're gonna have them growing, late spring, starting to early summer, and become sale ready at the start of the fall. Now, if we're not controlling it at all, and if, say, I'm a producer, and this makes sense for many production systems, right? If you go out and you just throw the ram or the buck in with the animals and let it breed, it's just gonna breed and breed and breed, and hopefully eventually they'll get pregnant during that breeding season. You unfortunately also end up with a very long lambing or kidding season. And that, again, comes back to the facilities and labor requirement. If you're using kidding jugs and you have too many dams to fit in those kidding jugs to circulate them through at one period of time, you might need to trickle those on purpose. That way you can manage that labor. The other flip side of this is you have to consider that market as well, because they're all gonna be sale ready or ideal at a different time. So some of them may be quite light for the market when you wanna sell. Some of them may be quite heavy. And we also have to consider that sometimes it gets to a point that if we keep those animals more and more, then they will not necessarily be the most profitable for the inputs that we put into them. And so again, thinking about what that market looks like and how much we are investing in our animals to determine when we want to get those sale ready. Here are some tools you can use. There are some commercially made. They're not very expensive, but they are basically management wheels. The inside turns, and so if you pick a date, this is when I breed, based on the day of the month, then it will tell you basic management throughout that entire year, even up to when they should be market ready. They're a very useful tool. On the other side, you could literally just Google a lambing due date calculator. So if you know when you put those rams in, you can determine the date they would be expected to be on the ground without having to count on your calculator or on your calendar. And you could put your last day. If you took the bucks out, that would be the very last day that you should be seeing lambs. So that helps you. Simple tools. Another one is we have these gestation tables for sheep and goats. So it's very simple. It's kind of like what you just saw, except all on one sheet. If you hang it up in your barn, very easy tool to be able to reference, or even if you're working on your records, you can reference this. All right, so then we have to prepare our animals. Like I said, nutrition is critical. pre-breeding health, and then the rams and bucks. And if you were here, which many of you were, or at least some of you small ruminant producers, at my third Thursday, we actually did a pre-breeding exam for everything you can do without the vet's assistance. All right, body condition scores. Same as with all our species, right? In cattle, we have a scale of 1 to 9. You want it to be circa a 6 for breeding so that it is good fertility. In sheep and goats, we have a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being that emaciated. Basically, I have never, ever, except for one time, seen a 1. I have one later on in my slides, but in person, only ever seen a 1 time. Most of ours, if they're underweight, are gonna be about a 2, 2.5. And then where we want them to be is a 3, 3.5, even up to a 4 a little bit, depending on how you're scaling. But at a 4, you're starting to get a little bit overweight. 5, severely obese. Those things waddle. We have one we just sent out. We had a doe. She was very territorial of the feeder, and we sent her out last week because she just waddled. She looked like she had quads, and she was open. It's kind of sad. So she's gone. But anyway, if we have them too emaciated or too skinny, what's going to happen is they are not going to have enough nutrients to put into reproduction. So like I said, it's a luxury. If they cannot have the nutrients to even survive as an animal, then they're not going to be able to put extra into the baby. Also at that point, you may not even have them ovulating, so there's no chance of even getting pregnant. If they're obese, it's a little less critical in terms of getting pregnant. There's chances they're going to have a hard time getting pregnant, but some of those other challenges will come in pregnancy. And also there are some epigenetic factors. Science, way out of the scope of this, but it's possible she could be, of course, she could be passing on that obesity onto her kids, and we want to really think about the offspring and the products that we are making. All right, flushing. I know y'all are cattle producers? Cattle? All you cattle producers. I like my small ruminants. Anyway, I don't judge. Okay. In sheep and goats, we do flushing, which can help in cattle, of course. But what we really want to do is right before breeding, especially if they're on the thin side, so if they're about a 2, 2.5, we want to increase that energy so that they're basically telling the body, hey, at this point we have extra energy, we have extra going into your nutrition, I think it's a good time to cycle. I think we're able to make that happen. And so basically we're just tricking them into making sure that they are able to ovulate, getting that body condition score up. What you can do is just supplement about a ½ pound to a pound more of grain of some sort, or even if you're just using a concentrate, go out there and just throw them out a little bit more. It will help. The other thing you could do is if you have a better pasture at that time, put them on the better pasture. It will also help them start to flush. All right. I love the males. Breeding soundness exam. Like I said, all of us Rebro people were weird, so just bear with me. Breeding soundness exam is critical. It's critical in all of your species and the bulls as well. Similar in our small ruminants. We want to look at that physical conformation. So we want to make sure they have good sound. If they can't go out there and mount the female, they should not be sent out there. If they have bad teeth, if they cannot go out there and actually eat the forages to maintain body condition, they shouldn't go out there because they're not going to maximize your ability to get your animals pregnant. Again, body condition. What happens with small ruminants especially too is that when we send the males out, they concentrate so much on breeding the females that sometimes they even forget to eat. And so they need to be in a nice or even slightly over-conditioned body condition score, so 3.5 or 4, because it's even possible they could drop some body condition score while they're out there breeding. So we want to make sure that they are set up for success before we even use them. We do a reproductive exam. At Third Thursday, I actually got in the pens and did this to some of our bucklings. But really what you do, first is you want to do a testicular circumference. You do this at the biggest part of those testicles, and the size of testicles is very closely related to how fertile the animal is going to be. So it's pretty critical. In goats, there is a much less differential in the size of testes in mature animals, but in sheep, it's very critical because there is such an array of sizes. We also want to make sure that they are symmetrical, free of lumps, no injuries, they're not dragging too low below the hocks, and it's not up here, but we really want to look at their health history because if they have had a fever recently where their testicles ended up being too hot, it can kill the sperm and the semen, well, the sperm that's in there, and for a period of time, they're going to be infertile. Could be up to 60 days for that to completely replenish. So for BSEs, I highly recommend doing those at least 60 days or right about 60 days before breeding, just in case there is an issue where they need to replenish their sperm. Now, we also look at the semen. Generally, the semen in a lot of this is done by a veterinarian, all the way down through the reproductive exam. That stuff you can actually do yourself. So if you are not gonna bring in a veterinarian, you can at least check these phenotypic type things. If we look at our semen though, a vet can collect semen, look at motility. So that's how well it swims. Is it swimming straight? Is it moving? They don't always get as low as looking at the individual sperm, but they will look and see if there's just a glistening wave, and that can tell them if that sperm is active. We also look at morphology. So the morphology is basically, I have a slide later that shows you, but it's just how well structured that sperm is. If the tails, this is healthy sperm. So there's the head and the tail, it's all straight. You would think that these could swim straight. If they're swimming in a circle, if there's two heads, if they don't have a part that provides energy, all of that is gonna make that animal infertile. It's even more critical because if you have your one ram or run buck, you throw him out there in the field and he's not fertile, you've missed that entire breeding season, especially if you've left it out there for a period of time. And you don't wanna come up with a year where this animal is not able, you're not gonna have your offspring like you need to remain sustainably productive. All right, we also have to consider our ratios. These are generally presented online. Now, depending on your production system, you can push some of these ratios higher with our mature rams and bucks. But we wanna stick around 35 to 50 ewes in our rams. For yearlings, 20 to 35, and then if you're using a ram lamb, you're even lower, so 15 to 20 ewes. For a buck to doe ratio, we have 20 to 40 does per buck, and then for the yearlings, or our bucklings, that's 15 to 20 does per buck. Pre-breeding. I know Dr. Lay did her chickens today, but if you listen to her talks, she is very fantastic at giving her talks regarding our FOMACHAs, fecal egg counts, and what that looks like in our small ruminants. That is something we absolutely want to do. In 30 to 60 days at least, because if you have to treat them, you want to make sure that you're able to overcome some of those challenges. We also have to do our pre-breeding vaccines. We want to look at the Campylobacter, chlamydia, Clostridial species as well. If you have a problem with CL or if you have a concern, you can do that one. Not as critical, especially if your herd is closed off or you're not concerned at all. Right. So when we get up to breeding, that's all pre-breeding. Now we're up to breeding. The first thing we want to do is ask if they're ready. We did a lot of work to get them ready in the previous slides. But for this one, I threw it up there because we want to be conscious of our doelings or our ewe lambs. They need to be at least 2/3 of the mature weight before you breed them. If we're going to put a number on that, we can shoot for about 80 pounds before breeding. Depending on where you put them or when you put them on the ground, whether it's January, February, April, May, they could hit that in the first year. However, in most of our production systems, unless you're really pushing for that, they're not going to. So we want to wait till that subsequent breeding cycle to actually get them pregnant. If we push them in that first year, yes, they can get pregnant, likely going to throw a single, but what you can do is end up stunting them, their growth and their productivity long term. So these are things we really want to consider when we are trying to breed doelings or ewe lambs. All right, are they ready? How are they going to be serviced? Natural service. The most common, We go out there again, throw the buck and the ram out in the field. He services them. You can even do this if you are synchronizing, so you can control that season and still use natural service and release that buck or ram at a specified time. The pros: low labor, low cost, higher conception rates. That's important because in our beef cattle, we see higher conception rates, normally with their AI, especially if it's traditional AI. However, that's opposite the case in our small ruminants. With this breeding plan, you have less control. I put potential for disease as not as much of a worry, but the biggest thing is if you didn't do a BSE or that breeding soundness exam, you have the potential of putting in a bad sire. And again, that's what can be critical, because if he is not healthy, then he cannot have healthy offspring. AI exists. It is nowhere near as prolific. If we're lucky, we can get 40%, and that's on the high end. So again, not like cattle, but there are reasons we do it. Normally it's for genetics. We do this in a lot of, if we're trying to make breeding stock, if we have show animals, that kind of thing, then we're typically gonna resort more to AI. It's a lot more expensive, and there's technical skills. So I put these pictures up there because it's interesting, not because I'm promoting this in any way, but laparoscopic AI is actually a technique we use currently. I say we, I have never done it. I take it to a specialist. But lap AI exists, and we are going directly into the uterus to fertilize those animals. You can see there's specialized equipment. You have to have specialized people, or we can do just in the cervix AI or vaginal AI. Again, those are even less effective than the laparoscopic. In the future, though, if you're interested, I hope to be doing producer AI sessions for small ruminants, hopefully starting next year, so to be continued. Not lap AI, like I said. Tools we can use are the ram or buck effect. We can do marketing harnesses, that's typically for sheep, and then different forms of synchronization, which I'm not gonna harp on today. Ram or buck effect. This is if we introduce a male after he's been separated for a period of time, he can induce a female to ovulate. And when he does so, it's gonna all synchronize at least a portion of those animals. So him being introduced can make them cycle. Excuse me. Other things, so I put this up here. I know you producers that have males and small ruminants have seen this before. You may not know what it is, but basically it's called the Flehmen response. And he is sniffing pheromones, and he goes straight up in this vomeronasal receptors. And basically, he's gonna do that when he's ready to reproduce, especially if a female is cyclic. And so it's just kind of a funny thing to see out in the field, because he'll just stand there for a period of time, or he'll go up and sniff a female's pee, and then he'll stand there. And it's kind of weird, but also funny. The males also, in goats, will urinate on themselves. It's disgusting, but also super cool, because that's them sharing some of their pheromones, expressing dominance. Anyway, showing that they are ready to reproduce. All right, marking harnesses. Like I said, this is better in sheep, especially those that do not have horns. Our goats, especially here on the farm, like to take their horns and put it right up under them straps and tear them up, mess them up, get them on where they're not supposed to be. And sheep is a very effective way to see who is actually getting bred. So we have this harness with a crayon that sits right there on the sternum of the animal. And as you can see down here, when he mounts, it's actually gonna color. So if I was going to look at my females after I put my ram in, say I synchronized them and I threw my ram in a few days, 3 days, 4 days, if I go out there, see who's marked, I would say these didn't cycle because they didn't get caught. Those I would especially target to make sure they get rebred. If I was controlling those cycles, I might change the color for the next cycle. If I put red on there, then I can see who's getting bred again and again to kind of see when in the season my animals may be kidding or, well, lambing out. It also can tell you who's not cyclic. And You don't want to keep a non-productive animal. We want to send her down the road. All right, cedars can be used. Depends exactly on your goals if you're synchronizing. This just naturally mimics progesterone, and when you pull it out, all the animals are going to cycle at the same time. We have different hormones, like I said, we can use luteolase, cysterelin, very similar to cattle, just lower doses. And then we actually have PG600. So these are all off-label. PG600 is actually used in pigs, but if you're interested, chat with the vet. All right.
Yes. Is there any questions? I know Dr. Carr will be around here if you have any questions. I think they're supposed to start lunch in about 4 minutes.
Okay, ultrasound, give vaccines. We're not gonna do that. Feed, make sure you feed to the numbers, and yep. There's your takeaways. Questions? Great, thank you guys, enjoy lunch. Oh, I have, I have surveys. I know you guys get surveyed to death, but this really helps us get funding so that we can fund things like this, especially food, really hard to fund for a program. So if you're willing to fill out a survey, whether it's beef or sheep or goats, on this wall by the bathroom are a couple. They're only 4 questions each, so I would tremendously appreciate it. Like I said, it helps us feed you, it helps us get materials, all the things. Thank you. Oh, I'll do my best.
Over the years, I've had 2 cows.
Still need help pushing the rest of it off.